The Dhamma is not an accessory. We do not accessorize Dhamma. We cannot accessorize the Dhamma. It's not something that we add on to our lives simply because it fits nicely here and there as we choose. The Dhamma does not work on our terms. In this world, in this life that we live, where everything is being led towards controlling. We're being controlled as a society. And in turn, we are controlling things that fall within the umbrella of whatever we deem as things that we can control ourselves. So many have been using the Dhamma as a way to make it some additional thing, an accessory. In essence, meaningless. It's just an added thing. It's almost like a prosthetic, something that you add. Meanwhile, the Dhamma is life. You cannot separate your life from the Dhamma. It's not some ritual that we do once a week, once a day, or whatever. It's not some type of a puja. It's not some type of a relic worship. It's not none of those nonsensical things, things that don't have anything to do with the Dhamma. And that's what we see Lord Buddha trying so desperately to do in this very beautiful, extensive sutta, the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta from the Dīgha Nikāya, the long discourses, which today we are continuing to cover and explore as the second week. We saw last week how Lord Buddha was speaking to both the laity in the form of Vassakara, the chief minister of King Ajatasattu, who came in trying to find ways to learn if there's some technique, some method whereby he could overcome his enemies. And Lord Buddha listed those qualities that ensure the unity, ensure the harmony of a group of people, whether it's individuals, whether it's a family, whether it's a society. Basically, he was teaching harmony. He was teaching methods of correlating and connecting with others. In other words, respect, being respectful towards oneself and others. Consideration is another word that we really have forgotten in our society. So Mahāparinibbāna Sutta is not just the sutta that talks about, to us, that describes to us the last days of Lord Buddha before his parinibbāna, before his death, before his final release. It's not just that. That part is only a small portion, I consider, because Lord Buddha was doing his very best. Almost, it was the final sprint, the final lap of 45 years of teaching human beings and other beings. And we saw how he was also teaching the Bhikkhus of ways to make sure to help protect the Dhamma, because the Bhikkhus were being entrusted with the safekeeping of the Dhamma. But we can't do that if the Sangha, if the community of Bhikkhus did not know how to have consideration towards each other, kindness. And then we saw how Lord Buddha was warning the Bhikkhus that so long as there are the kileshas in our hearts, then there will be crumbling, the decaying, the elimination, the dying off of the Sāsana in its entirety, not just with the Bhikkhus, but also with the laity as well. So the Dhamma itself was being infused into the hearts, into the minds of the listeners, as we see one group after another, where Lord Buddha, despite the fact that he was 80, despite the fact that he was in pain, because he had a severe backache, he still kept telling Ananda, come Ananda, let's go to this city, let's go to that city, let's go to this group of people. Ananda, go and gather the Bhikkhus, I have to talk to them. And he would spend hours going over the teachings that he had given them in the past to reconfirm, reaffirm to them, and ask them, do you have any questions? To make sure that he was giving them the whole of the Dhamma. And Lord Buddha never kept anything back. That's why we don't have any secret teachings in the Dhamma, Sāsana. We don't have any secret teachings. Because he gave it all. He shared it all. Because he knew that the Dhamma is the antidote, the perfect antidote in this cowardly world that we live in this complicit world that we live in, where there's so much adhamma taking place around us. And I also mentioned how during in the beginning of last week's, when I started the sutta, how parinibbāna is often mistranslated as the final nibbana, where the arahant doesn't come back from, etc. That is not correct, even though that is how many people have translated it. It teaches, Parinibbāna itself is the teaching of true freedom. And Lord Buddha, having attained it while alive, he was teaching it. To whom? To actual human beings who were alive as well. So when we come across that term, we need to also be aware of its nuances, because parinibbuta or parinibbuto means also freedom from the world. Freedom from the world that an arahant attains to. World that is anything that is worldly, anything that is connected to, attached to this thing that we call the world, possessions, positions, conditional things. The arahant has released himself from that world. And every time an arahant would go into arahatta phala, for example, the fruition level or stage of an arahant, one who has attained to that stage, they would cut themselves off from everything. And many bhikkhus and bhikkhunis would enjoy remaining in that state. So, but in this context, because of the theme, which is connected to the death of Lord Buddha, it means the final time that he would go into such a state. Okay, so just to clarify there. So, yes. So in this sutta, which will be revealing itself more and more as we go on, we see the message of self-reliance that Lord Buddha is talking about. The self-reliance, healthy individual effort or healthy individuality in a world where we've become such conformists, such collectivistic in everything, so that we don't have a voice. We've become part of the crowd where we don't have a backbone to stand on, to be unafraid. But every time you sit to meditate, you are reclaiming that self-reliant status of yours. And that's why it's such a powerful, courageous position to be in when you are facing your worst enemy, collection of the kileshas, the three defilements, the poisons, the most powerful enemies you could ever find in existence. Not death, not an actual physical enemy you call an enemy out there coming at you. So self-reliance and being fearless in the face of trouble is what we are being constantly reminded of throughout this sutta, in the form of Samvega, which hopefully we'll be able to talk more about today, possibly, if we have time. So here we will start today from the 7 factors of awakening that Lord Buddha will discuss to remind the bhikkhus of, in order for the bhikkhus not to crumble and disintegrate, as factors for them to fall back on when they are losing, for example, their focus, when the kileshas are running the show, as it were. So this is the Bojjhanga, 7 factors of awakening section. And Lord Buddha continues, Bhikkhus, I will teach you 7 more principles to be followed to prevent crumbling. Listen and attend carefully. I shall now speak. Yes, Bhante, the bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One continued. And what, bhikkhus, are the 7 principles to be followed to prevent crumbling? Crumbling as the Sangha, that is. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus live while cultivating the awakening factor of mindfulness, sati, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. So long as there is sati, he's saying, the awakening factor of sati, this is not just mere, oh, be mindful. This is awakening factor. The awakening factors, as you know, 7, the 7 satta bojjhangas or sambojjhangas, there are 7. These are the apex of each of these qualities, spiritual factors, awakening factors. So when we mention here sati as a bojjhanga, anga means a factor. So bodhi anga, bodhi means awakening, right? So bodhi anga means bojjhanga, meaning a factor that leads one to awakening. So this is not mere sati, just on a superficial level. This is deep. This is when it has gone to a level of mahasati, where it's with you. It's no longer just you observing, let's say, whether you're with metta or whether you're with your body sensations or breath or something like that. This is you staying with whatever is taking place with the mind or the body or the heart between sittings also. When you're opening your car door or your house door, you're there, you're watching, you're carefully observing the mind. So Lord Buddha is saying, so long as the bhikkhus have this, then there's not going to be any disappearance of the Sangha, meaning the disappearance of the Dhamma. Continues, bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus live while cultivating the awakening factor of investigation of states, Dhamma Vichaya, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Because without sati, it is impossible to apply Dhamma Vichaya. Investigation requires the presence of consistent alertness, awareness, yoniso manasikara. Remember? wise reflection. That's another term that alternates between sati and yoniso manasikara. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus live while cultivating the awakening factor of persevering energy, vidya, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Of course, you're going to have days or moments or times where your sit doesn't feel like it has enough energy behind it, enough zest, enthusiasm, humility, dedication. We're human. That does happen. But we must resist by the introduction of vidya when there is hardly any left. Because this is where people fall into the loophole, or not the loophole, but into the abyss of boredom. And it's so difficult to get out of unless they reignite their zest, their chanda, their desire, healthy spiritual desire. We call Dhamma chanda. That manifests in the form of vidya. So the vidya has to be there in every sit. Just enough to keep the fire going. Next, bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus live while cultivating the awakening factor of joy, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. This again is the awakening factor, joy. This is not mere superficial joy. This is the joy that whenever you remind yourself of, suddenly it perks you up. You sit up straight suddenly when you are being bombarded by tinhamidha, sloth and torpor, drowsiness, absent-mindedness during a sit, for example. So this joy brings up this, I can sit longer. And usually that longer sit means at least an extra hour when you felt like you could not sit any more seconds. That's the power of the awakening factor of joy. And this is special because immediately after the joy starts to subside, suddenly there is the next awakening factor, which is tranquility of mind. This is a special kind of joy, which is a preparation for samadhi to take place. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus live while cultivating the awakening factor of tranquility of mind, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. In other words, Lord Buddha is giving the bhikkhus the tools for nibbana, the tools for awakening. And that is the reason why we go forth as bhikkhus. Plain and simple. So Lord Buddha is reminding the bhikkhus the reason why we are bhikkhus. To attain nibbana. That's it. That's it. That's the primary goal. Now, in addition to that, of course, we are involved in disseminating the Dhamma, to teach, to help the community by guiding them, by instructing them, by showing them, by teaching them the Dhamma. But the primary goal is to have ourselves awaken to the Dhamma and then show the path to others. Not to fake it, otherwise it's the blind trying to lead the blind. And we know what happens. They both fall off the abyss, off the cliff, into the abyss. So Lord Buddha knew about this before he died, before he closed his eyes for the last time. So he's urging the bhikkhus to reignite their interest in the Dhamma. And one of the best ways to do that is by going back to the Bojjhangas, because that is such a powerful, this is such a powerful formula of success. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus live while cultivating the awakening factor of collectedness of mind, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Samadhi, the Samadhi Bojjhanga. Without Samadhi, it is impossible to attain Nibbana. Now, some people have said, but what about those individuals who, while listening to Lord Buddha's talks, discourses, they attained even arahantship? They were not necessarily practicing retreats or going on deep, retreats or meditations. But what is being missed there in that interpretation is that when a person is attaining to those states, they attain because they have dropped into a state of deep samadhi while listening to Lord Buddha give a discourse. That's why Lord Buddha was excellent, engaging the mind of the listener and approaching the heart in such a way, tweaking the teaching in such a way where it would be perfectly prescribed for that listener and their level of understanding, in such a way where the mind would allow itself to trust. And this is the thing which many people have a difficulty with teachers, especially on retreats, especially if the person has had one or more teachers prior to that teacher or teachings. So, but when that moment happens, when there is trust, suddenly the beautiful aspects of the Dhamma appear to the mind, to the heart of the individual. And that moment is taking place in the deep levels of samadhi, even while listening to the Dhamma. In fact, one of the ways to attain Nibbana, as we see in the Anguttara Nikāya, in the Book of the Fives, Lord Buddha is saying, while listening to the Dhamma, you can even attain arahantship. How beautiful is that? We can never underestimate. So the power of such a reality, but it has everything to do with you, the listener. So it has to be unfolding the samadhi to take place. So I just wanted to mention that. Also, bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus live while cultivating the awakening factor of equanimity, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. And if the person is practicing the proper method of samadhi, just like in the case of joy that unfolded into passaddhi or tranquility of mind, similarly, when they reach a level of samadhi, then they experience this depth of equanimous state of mind, of heart. There's a sense of unshakability, imperturbability that takes place. This does not come about by extra thinking. This does not come across, the person doesn't come across this by accident. This takes work. This takes a lot of trust and confidence. And that's why we take refuge in the Triple Gem, in your own goodness. Remember that? Your own goodness? In this way, bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus are closely adhering to and living by these 7 principles that prevent crumbling, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Now we get to the 7 perceptions. 7 sanya, satta sanya. Bhikkhus, I will teach you 7 more principles to be followed to prevent crumbling. Listen and attend carefully. I shall now speak. Yes, Bhante, the bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One continued. And what bhikkhus are the 7 principles to be followed to prevent crumbling? Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus develop the perception of impermanence, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. We keep hearing about the 3 characteristics of existence in this Dhamma and discipline. Anicca, followed by dukkha, followed by anatta. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Many times we become jaded during the day or in our lives, especially if you have been raised in this tradition culturally, or you happen to be a bhikkhu, for example, and like the case is with the audience here that Lord Buddha is addressing. Lord Buddha is emphasizing the importance of bringing to mind, sanya, things that the person has seen and witnessed for themselves that loudly scream of the fact that nothing is stable. Their relationships, their bodies, their lives, everything's changing. So this is a powerful teaching all on its own. So Lord Buddha is saying, if you can only do this, then you realize not to take yourself so seriously. You'll have more consideration about things. Sometimes I get questions that relate impermanence with the fear and despair that we see taking place in the world today, because many people are equating the principles of the Dhamma with whatever is being presented to us in the world, visually, etc., experientially. So sometimes I get questions that try to equate, oh, Bhante, the impermanence that Lord Buddha is talking about must be what we are experiencing today, right? They're not. They're two different things. Impermanence or anicca brings within us this sense of, induces within us a sense of urgency, what Lord Buddha calls samvega, but without the factor of despair. This is huge. This is such a big difference between what we are seeing in the world for the past 21 years, but especially during the last 3 years, where there's this sense of escalating, accelerating sense of despair and fear being promulgated through different channels, usually the media, which is the powerful, most powerful entity out there, I think. This is different than the impermanence that Lord Buddha is talking about. Of course, it has elements of impermanence because all conditioned things are impermanent, yes, but there is a huge difference between what we are being led to experience and the anxiety that is created within the human brain, the sense of dis-ease is quite remarkably different. Because impermanence that Lord Buddha is talking about here induces, opens the doorway for wisdom to take place. Why? Because there's samvega. Samvega leads the person to want to experience a state of tranquility, not run away from something, which is what is being, humanity is being led to experience in the case of the despair and the fear-mongering that's going on, because every day we have a new threat being tossed at us. Today it's the climate change. Yesterday was something else, if you recall. The day before that, it was something else. And every day, every week, every month, every year, it will be different. This is different than the impermanence that Lord Buddha is talking about. Lord Buddha's impermanence does not create chaos in the heart. It creates understanding, because the person now has a special gaze that they're applying upon life. They're starting to detach from this longing to hold on to something as tangible. They're peeking through the reality, the fabric of reality that they thought was stable. And they're not fooling themselves. So there is no manipulation in what Lord Buddha is teaching, unlike what we have today in the world. There's a lot of manipulation. That is not samvega. So, because samvega doesn't bring out that sense of fear. Yes, there is a sense of fear in the person that I cannot waste another life like this. Okay, what can I do? So you take, remember earlier I was mentioning about self-reliance. The person takes ownership of their life and starts to do something without relying on someone else, or giving up your freedoms, like the case has been for us for the last 20 plus years. Giving up this right for this hope that if we give this up and do this as they tell us to, then we're going to be safe. Then we're going to have this sense of tranquility. All nonsensical, all lies. The Dhamma is not about lies. That's another reason why these are two different things. So please don't equate the two together. I say this because this question has been coming up by different students, different individuals asking, wanting to know. So let's not go down the road of adhamma. Well, Lord Buddha's teaching is the Dhamma, pure and simple. So, bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus develop the perception on the lack in any substantiality of his self, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Meaning, lack of any substantiality of the self, we're talking about anatta. Anatta. Many times Lord Buddha would use anicca and anatta conjointly, back to each other, back to back, as it were. Why? Because anything that has a substantiality must also be permanent. That's what we want, in fact, when we're looking for permanency in things, because it gives us the illusion. That's why we put on makeup. That's why we like to have possessions or like to go and wash that car that we love. Oh, that's mine. Or reconfirm or reaffirm our dedication to this person and call them my beloved or something, and say, I will love you and love you forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And we both know that the fact is, time is passing through our toes underneath the table. Nothing stays the same. So what forever are we really talking about? I'm living in delusion, so are you, and we're both living in delusion. That is adhamma. Because when we have an attachment to this atta, or the sense of substantiality, substance means something that is not changing. What we're trying to do is tell ourselves lies, that I'm not going to feel the pain. I'm going to tell and scream and scream and scream while closing my ears that this is not happening, but it is. That's why there is dukkha, because of anicca. Because the thing that I love to hold on to, I know is slipping through my fingers like the hourglass, the sand. But what do we do about it? These truths are sufficient to lead the person to have samvega. That's why I always repeat this fact about the Dhamma. Whatever Dhamma talks you listen to, the teacher, if they're talking Dhamma, that is, the teacher must always be reaffirming, reigniting the sense of samvega within the listener. Otherwise, you are wasting time. There is no Dhamma there. Okay? You see the presence of samvega in every single discourse that Lord Buddha gave for 45 years. So that's what we're seeing here again. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus develop the perception on the repulsive, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. The repulsive is anything that you see as beautiful, but being able to see the opposite of that. Anything you find appealing, attractive. Some weeks ago, I covered, while I was in Malaysia, I covered a sutta where Venerable Mahā Candana goes to Sakka's palace in Tavatimsa, if you remember. And Tavatimsa, the king of the gods, Sakka himself, Indra, Lord Indra, was showing off his new palace to Venerable Mahā Candana. Oh, look at this. How many turrets, how many beautiful, rooms it has, this many maidens, this and that. And Venerable Mahā Candana, to teach him a lesson, extends his toe one toe, just one, and touches the wall of this palace, this massive palace, and the whole thing shakes, probably with like an 8-point, on the Richter scale, earthquake. And everybody starts running around in fear, including Sakka, who was, by the way, a Sotapanna. But he was attached to this something beautiful that he had constructed as the king of the gods. So this is another way of looking at the repulsive, seeing the fact that it is so passing, the fact that it is impermanent. That's another way of looking at impermanence, seeing it as repulsive. So there's nothing to be attracted to, is there? The beautiful body that you look at, either in yourself or in your loved one, just fast forward the tape a little bit, by 70, 80 years. And now they are frail, bones are sticking out, the skin is like paper thin, veins, arteries. And what if you fast forward a little bit more and they are dead? You see what's happening? So being able to be perceiving the repulsive. There was one bhikkhu who was attached. He was actually attracted to this courtesan. Secretly, he was attracted to her. He hadn't broken any sila, but with bodily actions, that is. But nevertheless, Lord Buddha knew that his mind was thinking of possibilities until the courtesan, this very beautiful, who used to charge 1,000 gold coins for one night. Imagine, 1,000 gold coins in those days. She died. And everyone knew about it. The whole kingdom was, oh, we lost such a, oh, everybody was like, oh, she was beautiful, this and that. In that culture, in that time period, this was the thing. But because she did not have any relatives or anyone to take responsibility or ownership of the ceremonies of the funeral and all that, it was left up to the king. And Lord Buddha knew about this, and he asked the king to prolong the funeral ceremony, meaning to extend it by several days. I think it was about 10 days or so, if not more. And the king said, as you wish, Lord. So they displayed the body in the middle of the square, in a public place, the body, covered up in a veil, this and that. But this was the thing, the added, I guess, the trick, if you will. And the king was advised to go ahead and give away the body to whoever was willing to pay for her. Remember, she used to charge 1,000 gold coins per night. And he said, who among you is willing to pay 1,000 coins for her? You pay it, she's yours. Nobody paid. Nobody's hand went up. How many hours had passed? The night before, they were willing to. Now they weren't. The most beautiful, the most attractive woman in the kingdom. And this went on until no one, they were giving away the body for free as the days went on. And the body was becoming more and more repulsive and smelly, and things were oozing out of the ears, the mouth, you can imagine. And then finally, the bhikkhu who had not been in that kingdom, he arrives. And he hears about this, and he's in total despair. And he goes and approaches, and Lord Buddha has a few words for him. But the bhikkhu is completely transformed, because here she is, this woman that he was so attracted to. Now he was being shocked down to his bones with the fact of the repulsive nature of whatever he was observing so closely. Not just with his eyes, but with almost every other sense, especially the nose. It was horrible. There you go. Now, can we do that without the person dying first? That is what the job of the bhikkhu is. And so long as we're able to do that on a moment-to-moment basis, especially with things that we find attractive, it doesn't have to be a human being, it could be anything else, like a possession, for example. That will ensure that we are on the correct path as bhikkhus, as those who have gone forth. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus develop the perception of the dangers to be encountered, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. The dangers to be encountered. Let's say one of the things is, for example, as bhikkhus, we're not encouraged, we're not basically supposed to go outside at night. Go shopping, go somewhere, go amidst the crowd, amidst lay people at night. Unless it's an important thing, unless it's for medical reasons or somebody's sick or you have to go, etc. Or you're giving a Dhamma discourse in some cases. But otherwise, we're not supposed to be skulking around, moving about. Why? Because there are dangers that could happen. And so long as you're a bhikkhu, you're caught outside and something happens even without you being involved, but it falls on your head. You, as the bhikkhu, must know better. You should not have placed yourself in that precarious position. So here, the dangers to be encountered can also be seen as such. So bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus develop the perception of relinquishing, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Relinquishing what? It could be anything. It could be possessions, usually. It could be this, it could be possessions, but it could also be, there's this infatuation with food. I used to be very curious why bhikkhus would have this fascination with food. Why would they make such a big deal about food? This is when I was a layman for years. And I would observe, I would closely observe, because, I was around bhikkhus for over 30 years. I would see what would happen behind doors, when they would be by themselves, they would just behave normally. And I would see sometimes, in some cases, with some bhikkhus, this infatuation with food. That's one example. And then you would see or hear about stories where bhikkhus would go on Pindapada and come back with food that is not enough. Some of them would be complaining, some of them would not be happy, because we survive on that food, yes? But then you see other bhikkhus who would just look at it and eat it as if it was already full to the brim with all kinds of delicacies, all kinds of curries and delicious fruits and things like that. It didn't make an impact on them. That is how we can also understand the statement. Perception of relinquishment. Of course, the person is not getting enough nutrients, yes, compared to a full bowl of food, yes. The bhikkhu knows that. They're not delusional. But they're not making a big deal about this. Sleeping on a comfortable, cozy mat or a bed, or on the floor, or being caught outside, there's no roof over your head, under a tree. This is a difficult lifestyle, not to have a monastery, not to have a stable home, always going from one place to the next to try to find a place that is suitable where you can live and practice and teach the Dhamma. That also can be one of those things that a person can look at, and with the sense of relinquishing it, not making a big deal about it, despite the fact that it is having an impact on the body, yes. But even getting sick doesn't become a big deal. All thanks to Patinissanga, giving up. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus develop the perception on dispassion, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Dispassion here means viraga, the opposite of raga, being passionately attached to something, not being so attached. In the West, we have this, I say we because I flew through Europe, and Italy and Spain. Passion is very much promoted. Not just in Europe, I have to say, the rest of the world now. I think that's an antiquated way of distinguishing, the world east and west or whatever. I think the world at large supports a lifestyle where there's passion towards something. And here in the Dhamma, we're being taught the opposite. Because so long as we are passionately living, what we're essentially trying to do is trying to look for something permanent in impermanence. We're trying to close our eyes to dukkha happening in front of our noses. That is living with ignorance. That's why Lord Buddha calls it avidya. Avidya. That's why this path is called the path of wisdom. Jnana dasana is that level of understanding that a person reaches in completion of the holy life, whether you're a layperson or a monk. Jnana dasana, knowledge, understanding. Dasana, to see, vision for yourself. But you won't be able to do that as long as you're stuck in the cage we call passion. Whether you're in a cage, whether the bars are gold, diamond studded, or just made of steel, you're still in a cage. So here the person is able to see that it is a cage. It is a cage, because ultimately I am the one who's suffering because of my passions. Bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus develop the perception on cessation, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Cessation happens when you have the previous steps covered. Remember, cessation here is also nirodha, as we see in the third noble truth. How can we see the third noble truth? What brings it about? Seeing there's dukkha, seeing the cause of dukkha. And just by the mere fact that you have seen dukkha and its cause already gives you room to breathe. That is nirodha, that is cessation, but you have to act on it. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into intellectual junk. Useless. Useless. A useless prescription for life-saving medicine. A useless recipe because it's not being put to use. It's not being applied to be made into this food that it can make some bread, for example, or some rice dish that could feed the hungry. It's useless. In this way, the bhikkhus, so long as the bhikkhus are closely adhering to and living by these 7 principles that prevent crumbling, then it is their success and growth that is to be expected, not their crumbling. Now, Lord Buddha just talked about 7 extra principles that they need to apply. First, things that they need to stay away from, obviously. Like last week, he went on several different groups of 7, group of 6, etc. Which, by the way, I mentioned it last week. I'll say it now again. I'll mention it. How many of these formulas can also be found in other suttas, namely the ones in the Anguttara Nikāya. You will find them, including the instructions or the guidance or the response that Lord Buddha gave, as we saw last week, to the chief minister of King Ajatasattu, the Maharaja, the chief minister Vassakara. That also is found in the Anguttara Nikāya, a book of the 7s. I think the Sutta number 20, something like that. So now we get to a more of what needs to be brought in order for it to glue the Sangha together. Now remember, this is not just for bhikkhus. I repeat, this is for everyone. So any of these principles or formulas you can take and apply it into your own life, like especially your relationship with your coworkers, for example, or especially your family members. I've never come across a family, especially as a therapist, and years before that as a teacher, when interacting with students and their families in these meetings, you see here and there, and my own family, of course, my brothers and siblings and all that, there's always some issues, right? We all have that. So these principles that Lord Buddha is presenting to us can be applied to bring a sense of cohesion, some consideration, extra love to the family before the family is hit with a major traumatic event. Let's say a sickness of a major caretaker, someone important in the family. Everyone's supposed to be important, right? But let's say the head of a family. Usually that's when everybody goes into a commotion state, and they try to come up with some ways to create the sense of unity. But that's also short-lived. So the whole point is to bring this even now into your lives as best as you can. So here Lord Buddha is presenting 6 qualities of warm-heartedness. That's how I translated this section. Bhikkhus, there are these 6 qualities of warm-heartedness. These are 6 conditions that lead to the well-being, success, and growth of the Sangha of Bhikkhus. Now listen and pay close attention to what I shall say. Again, you can think of it as alternate the words Sangha of Bhikkhus to your family. You could say it like that. So well-being, success, and growth of the family, or even co-workers in a business. Not to trivialize it, but you are dealing with human beings. So would you rather have animosity and bitterness or some sense of warm-heartedness? Of course, the latter. Yes, Bhante, replied the bhikkhus. Here, bhikkhus, when the bhikkhu treats his companions in the holy life with his bodily actions of loving kindness, both in public and in private, then it is the success and growth of the Sangha that is to be expected, not its crumbling. Notice here the words that Lord Buddha uses, both in public and in private. We live in a time period where people today go on social media with videos of them helping someone. With one bag of food or something they're presenting to, let's say, a homeless person, while the other hand is holding the phone away from them, taking a video shot of them doing this wonderful act, wonderful in quotation marks. That's ugly. So Lord Buddha knew about this almost 3,000 years ago, 2,600. So we do this, not just lay people, of course, but as bhikkhus, especially when there are gatherings. You know, in a few days, the Vassa will end, for example. And we will have the Katina ceremony, this and that. So it's lovely, very beautiful, traditional thing that happens. Okay, and then I would always observe. Is it truly metta? Also in private? Or is it just when the lay people are giving us the Katina, giving us this and this and this? So this is Lord Buddha's way of saying both. Not pretending. This is not keeping up pretenses. This is doing the work. You're walking the path. You're not just talking. You're showing love in bodily actions, Lord Buddha is saying. And soon we're going to see, again, bhikkhus, when the bhikkhu treats his companions in the holy life with his verbal actions of loving kindness, with words, both in public and in private. That means private either to themselves, to them, to the person that you're speaking with, but especially in the absence of the person when you're speaking with someone else about this other bhikkhu. Would you speak as if that bhikkhu was there when you were about to gossip about them? Imagine them sitting there. Would you still say those nasty words about them? And if you just stop yourself from doing that, already you're applying the beginning stages of metta in verbal action, meaning speech. So Lord Buddha is saying, so long as physically you're giving metta, you're showing metta. You're offering a chair, a seat to a bhikkhu. You're offering them a cup of water, even if they have less vassas, which is a ridiculous thing that I see many people still use as a gauge of respect by completely relinquishing their humanity, their consideration. Who cares if this is a young novice monk and I happen to have upasampada or higher ordination? They have to bring me a cup of water, not I. All these nonsensical things. Reach over and you help the person. Give them love. Show them love. This doesn't have to be with bhikkhus alone, as you see. You don't have to follow precepts to have this decency. This is called common courtesy. That's what gives us the honor of being called a human being. And you don't have to be a bhikkhu to do these things. That's what's important. But Lord Buddha is saying, if you do this, then definitely the Sāsana will not vanish anytime soon. Again, bhikkhus, when the bhikkhu treats his companions in the holy life with his mental actions of loving kindness, both in public and in private, then it is the success and growth of the Sangha that is to be expected, not its crumbling. When Venerables Anuruddha, Kimbila, and Nandiya were living together in Kosambi, and when the argument was happening in Kosambi, and they were living away from that area in a forest, they would speak only once a week, once every 5 days, where they would engage in conversation about the Dhamma, not about their own practice or about their own attainments, mind you, but just talking about the Dhamma. But during that time and in those days between, in their daily lives, they would always consider looking at, oh, how will my fellow companion in the holy life feel about this? Oh, there's some things here. Oh, or there's this food that I got, this thing, and I know from the past that this fellow bhikkhu, my companion in the holy life, likes, for example, I don't know, something. Let's say they get a certain type of fruit, maybe durian, who knows? And, oh, I love durian too. Yeah, but I would love to see him enjoy the durian. Let me put this aside for him. But there's only one. That's okay. Let me think. So this is happening in the mind of the bhikkhu, of the person. So this is the one way of understanding mental action of metta. This is beautiful. And obviously, again, you see how there are so many scenarios that we can apply in our daily lives. So again, because when the bhikkhu generously and equally shares with his virtuous companions in the holy life, whatever offerings he has rightfully obtained, this is exactly what I was just referring to, including the contents of his alms bowl, then it is the success and growth of the Sangha that is to be expected, not its crumbling. Sometimes the bhikkhus might go to the same village, or sometimes they might go, or at least to a different house, let's say. Or in some cases, you have bhikkhus who will say, let the other bhikkhus know that today I won't go to Pindapada, or I will skip, let's say, I need to be meditating, for example. And if the teacher is okay with that, and the bhikkhu goes ahead and meditates, and let's say he comes out of meditation right after the rest of the community comes from Pindapada, and they have food and he has none because he didn't go to Pindapada, and he doesn't have time to go to the city, to the village to obtain food and come back and eat in time. So here, the fellow bhikkhus would see that and say, oh, that's okay, I can just put some of my food. And if everybody puts a little bit of morsel of food into his bowl, he would be like, his bowl would be full, right? Especially if you have a certain number of bhikkhus. So you are being taught to not have this attraction towards food, because ultimately you're just eating it for the sake of maintaining the body so you can continue doing the work, the holy work. So that's another way of understanding that paragraph. Again, bhikkhus, when the bhikkhu dwells with his companions in the holy life, whether in public and in private, living with virtue that is continuously kept, blameless, unbroken, flawless, stainless, liberating him from his old negative patterns of behavior, virtues that are praised by the wise as pure, all of which leads him to the collectedness of mind, then it is the success and growth of the Sangha that is to be expected, and not its crumbling. Remember what I was saying about the main purpose of us being bhikkhus in the first place? Attaining of Nibbana. That has to stand on these legs called Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Without Sila, there is nothing. The whole thing crumbles. And not just for show. We don't practice the Patimokha for show, to tell people that we have 227 rules. We don't do it for show. This is something that we individually must be practicing. Especially the most important rule, and that is the mind. As Ajahn Mun would say, the most important, only rule that matters, that governs all the Patimokha, the mind. So if we're living like that, that means Sila is intact, because now it has become into what? Turned into what? Transformed into what? Adi Sila, higher virtue. That means the person's Sila is in the heart all the time, just like Mahasati, always with them. They go to the bathroom, it's with them. They go to sleep, it's with them. They wake up, it's with them. They eat, it's with them. Now, that's when it becomes unbroken. Unbroken. It's no longer, it makes no difference whether the person is in public or in private. Every time they walk, it's almost like them doing chankama all by themselves in front of their kuti. Even if they're walking in the middle of a store or in the middle of a very busy mall, their mind is there. Not looking here and there, checking out stores. Oh, look at that. Oh, that looks very nice and interesting and colorful or attractive. No. That makes it flawless. Because you're always checking, am I maintaining my old negative patterns of behavior or not? Am I different today than yesterday? Or am I not? That is what inculcates, brings up a sense of purity, which is panya. So you see, the Dhamma doesn't fall into your lap just like that. This is practice, whether you're a layman or a bhikkhu. Again, bhikkhus, when the bhikkhu dwells with his companions in the holy life, whether in public and in private, living with the noble view, which, when adhered to and continuously practiced, naturally leads to the utter destruction of suffering, then it is the success and growth of the Sangha that is to be expected, not its crumbling. Whenever we come across the word view in a context like this, what Lord Buddha usually is referring to is the stage of jnana dassana. The person has seen what is the path from what is not the path. So in other words, the way I understand this is, as long as the Sangha is going to have, at the very least, sotapannas in its midst, then the Sangha will never disappear. Imagine, because right view or noble view distinguishes itself from other ways of expressing such a sentence by the simple fact that it is talking about the ability of the person now to see the Four Noble Truths. That's what jnana dassana is. The person understands anicca, dukkha, anatta. They have broken the first three fetters. That's one way of understanding this paragraph. Because these are the 6 qualities of warm-heartedness. yeah, I think this is a good pace. I'll continue some more. You see, many times people would look at the sutta and say, Mahā Parinibbāna Sutta, it's the sutta on the death. And they usually would talk about, how Lord Buddha's death took place and what he said before dying and the cremation and the relics, all these things. And they completely miss out, skip on so much of the sutta. We see here, this is the second week, and we haven't even, touched the sutta in a sense, but there's so much to cover on other things. Lord Buddha didn't care about his body, about relics. The whole relics business was something that came about later. And we owe it to Venerable Buddha Ghosha. Usually his name always comes up when we have, incongruities and things like that, when things get really off whack and we move away from Dhamma to Adhamma, where we have pujas being presented as Dhamma. So many people look at the sutta as, yes, coming and seeing Lord Buddha before he dies, etc. So there is that old Indian darshan or dasana, in the sense of looking at a teacher. Venerable Vakkali, for example, he became a monk because he left his family, his own family, simply because he was mesmerized by the way that Lord Buddha looked. He found him very attractive, blissed out. That's what Venerable Vakkali ended up feeling every time he sat there and looked at Lord Buddha's body, his face. He was like, yes, I'm in bliss. Yes, I will attain Nibbana like this. That is a complete Micchāditthi. And that's what many people have turned this sutta into, where Lord Buddha actually forbids us bhikkhus to be involved in any of the relic business, let alone relic worship. I say this because sometimes people wonder, well, when is Bhante going to get into that juicy part of the sutta? Lord Buddha prevented Venerable Ananda, who was a very difficult learner, hard learner, slow learner. Because Venerable Ananda kept on asking, Bhante, when you die, how should we take care of the funeral, the burial, this and that? How will we divide your relics? And Lord Buddha, you can almost see him like with his hand, like almost like, Ananda, what are you talking about? That is not your business. Go and become an arahant. Leave that to the lay people. But that's exactly what bhikkhus ended up doing over the course of centuries. We become priests who conduct ceremonies, essentially, build monasteries. That's not the bhikkhu's job. This is what it all involves, because Lord Buddha is saturating the sutta here, which, by the way, it also was added over time. That also has to be said about the sutta. This was not just like that in the first council. So there were elements that were added, suttas that combined in order to make this sutta even more valuable. And I have a deep appreciation for that as well, because here it's like almost like a summary of previous teachings. So people's attention won't just go to the so-called funeral, death and the funeral and the relic division of Lord Buddha, etc. So this section is more advice given to the bhikkhus. Furthermore, whenever the Blessed One was staying on the hilltop at the Gijja peaks in Rajaghat, that's the vulture's peak that we hear about, he would often advise the bhikkhus in this manner. Bhikkhus, such is virtue, such is collectedness of mind, and such is wisdom. He's saying, Sila, this is Samadhi, and this is Panya. He is delineating them, he's explaining to them so that no bhikkhu would go to his kuti or his cave to meditate without having a clear understanding. At least as a teacher, he's done his job. The last thing you want is to teach and then have students who walk away with misconceptions about or misinterpretations of the teaching. That's why the teacher always will give, a good teacher will always give you an opportunity, the student, to ask questions. What if you didn't get it? That's okay. But the teacher is not going to be knowing that unless the student is presented with the material in the first place. So, or at least ask, Bhante, I didn't get that. And you have situations like that often. So here, Lord Buddha is trying, by covering Sila, Samadhi, Panya, he's trying to alleviate, remove the element of doubt, which is another word for ignorance, out of the mind of the listener, out of the mind of the bhikkhu. Because when ignorance is present, it means that doubt has not been eliminated. When doubt is present, that means ignorance has not been eliminated. In fact, that is one of the reasons why we see ignorance, avidya, as the very final, last sangyojana, the last fetter, before the person becomes an arahant. So, let's go deeper. Bhikkhus, when one lives with virtues throughout one's behavior, it becomes very fruitful, for it allows such a person to possess the very condition for right collectedness of mind, samadhi, to take place. When there is samadhi, it becomes very fruitful, for it allows a person to settle into the stability of mind. Then, such a person possesses the condition for wisdom, which itself is very fruitful, for it develops into the knowledge and vision, jnana dassana, allowing one to see things as they truly are, yatha bhutang pajanati. And his unliberated heart becomes fully released, where his contaminants of sensual lust, re-becoming, and ignorance, the asavas, the three asavas, are ended, and he is finally freed, attaining that which up to that point had not yet been attained, reaching the safe shore of no more suffering. So Lord Buddha is again giving them the keys to Nibbana. The keys. Nothing is being left for chance. Nothing is being left out there. It could be, would be, maybe. Unfortunately, we're living at a time period where many, many bhikkhus continue to promote the idea that it is impossible to attain Nibbana in this very life. If that is the case, we as bhikkhus, or at least those bhikkhus, have to disrobe, have to relinquish and go back to a more honorable business. Become accountants. Sell food at street corners. Much better. You'll do a much better job than pretending to be something that you're not. Because as bhikkhus, we must be at least on the path to attain these states. And attain these states. And then show it to the laity. That is what justifies the presence of bhikkhus. So there is no difference of opinion. There should not be. Every bhikkhu should be a practitioner, not a scholar type and a practitioner type, and that kind of nonsense. There needs to be this letting go of this upadana, which is such a powerful presence. The clinging, the craving of things, which is based on in ignorance. The person doubts it because of their ignorance, where they even doubt the very noble goal of the holy life. It's like somebody hanging from a rope, but at the same time pulling out a knife and cutting the rope above them. That is the essence of avijja, isn't it? So, Lord Buddha is realizing what is to come. And he is encouraging them not to be engaging in any kind of puja worship. He's saying no, 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 no. Because they knew Lord Buddha was getting old. And he did not designate a successor. The successor is the Dhamma. Period. Not the lineage holder teacher, not Venerable Mahākassapa, not this some Ajahn, not this Dalai Lama, not this person, the head of this. No, the Dhamma is the successor of Lord Buddha. Not his relics, not the temple that has the most relics. When I was in Asia, I was joking about this, which is based on facts, by the way, where every temple, it seems, has its own relic. How is that even possible? Well, there were some people who even came up with some interpretations. Well, there were these miracles that happened, and suddenly the bones multiplied, and Lord Buddha's bones showed up here and there. It's like, no, they didn't. Mostly it's fish bones. Okay? Fish bones. Go check. You do have some relics, of course, here and there. True, genuine. And you feel their power. But Lord Buddha said, who cares? Attain it yourself and have that experience of Nibbana yourself with the help of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Don't engage in any relic worship, nor encourage it. Many people today go or invite bhikkhus to their home, and guess what they take? The bhikkhus to their home, to those people's homes. They take this thing which they put, all ceremonies. Lifeless, empty, totally bogus ceremonies that have nothing to do with the Dhamma. They don't teach Sila, Samadhi, Panya. They don't show what it means to live according to Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the bhikkhu himself. And the lay people know this, and everybody keeps it hidden. We don't talk about this. We don't expose this. Meanwhile, the Sāsana dies a silent death. And new generation of people stop going to the temples because they see through all that hypocrisy. They don't want to be part of that. Yeah, mom, yeah, dad, you followed that because you respected your parents, even though you didn't believe in it. I don't subscribe to that way of living. That's why the young generation is not attending any ceremonies, any temples. That's the reason. Because there's too much hypocrisy. And the children or the teenagers see this. Young people see this. And we are responsible, both lay people and especially bhikkhus. So Lord Buddha is trying to limit that by sharing all this again and again. So he's preemptively trying to block the crumbling of the Sāsana, the possibilities of it. But, there is anicca, and even the teachings of Lord Buddha are conditioned. Hence, they too will vanish. Absolutely, that is the law of existence, anicca. So this is not just pointing fingers. Afterwards, when the Blessed One had stayed at Rajagaha for as long as he pleased, he addressed the Venerable Ananda and said, "Come, Ananda, let us go to Ambalatika." "As you wish, Lord." And the Blessed One, along with the Sangha of bhikkhus, went and took up residence at Ambalatika. While at Ambalatika, the Blessed One stayed in the royal vacation house. And there also the Blessed One often gave teachings to the bhikkhus thus: "Bhikkhus, such is virtue, such is collectedness of mind, and such is wisdom." And he's going to repeat, at least the way it has come down the centuries to us, the same teaching that we just saw. Bhikkhus, when one lives with virtues throughout one's behavior, it becomes very fruitful, for it allows such a person to possess the very condition for samadhi to take place. When there is samadhi, it becomes very fruitful, for it allows a person to settle into the stability of mind. then such a person possesses the condition for wisdom, which itself is very fruitful, for it develops into jnana dassana, knowledge and vision, allowing one to see things as they truly are, and his unliberated heart becomes fully released, where his contaminants of sensual lust, re-becoming, and ignorance are ended, and he is finally freed, attaining that which up to that point had not yet been attained, reaching the safe shore of no more suffering. Afterwards, when the Blessed One had stayed at Ambalatika for as long as he pleased, he addressed the Venerable Ananda and said, "Come, Ananda, let us go to Nalanda." "As you wish, Lord." And the Blessed One, along with the Sangha of Bhikkhus, went and took up residence at Nalanda. While at Nalanda, the Blessed One stayed in the mangrove grove of Pavarika. Nalanda is still there. It used to be one of the earliest universities in documented history that we still have remnants of. Thousands of bhikkhus used to live there, and there were thousands of teachers as well. So it's a lovely place to go and visit if you get a chance to one day. Now we get to the fourth section of the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta, and it is the very interesting, intriguing, and lovely, beautiful communication or dialogue that goes on between Lord Buddha and his chief disciple, Venerable Sariputta. So this section is, the heading is Sariputta's Lion's Roar, Sihanada in Pali. Then the Venerable Sariputta went to the Blessed One, and after respectfully paying homage to him, sat down at one side and spoke the following words. Bhante, I have such faith, such confidence in the Blessed One, that I declare that there has never been, there can never be, nor could there be in the present any other recluse or Brahmin more exalted and superior in their awakening than the Blessed One. So this is the chief's disciple saying, this is a lion's roar in a sense. That's one of the ways that, you know, as a noble disciple, Lord Buddha obviously is known for the lion's roar, but he also allowed his noble disciples, those Arya Savakas, especially the chief disciple in this case, to express lion's roars like this. And we have several places where Venerable Sariputta does so. But this is unique in, especially in this sutta, seeing this, flavorful, this lovely exclamation. And Lord Buddha doesn't miss a beat. Meaning, the moment Venerable Sariputta says this, makes this proclamation, see what Lord Buddha will say. Sariputta, that indeed is quite a lofty proclamation for you to be making. Sariputta, that indeed is a bold declaration, a true sounding of the lion's roar. But how is it, Sariputta, that you make such a categorical declaration? After all, have you had the direct experience of knowing the fully awakened Buddhas from the past? So he's challenging, he's poking, he's trying to probe. Where did you come up? What are you relying on to be able to make such a bold statement, Sariputta? And they're not alone here. They're surrounded by other bhikkhus and probably laity. So he says, after all, have you had the direct experience of knowing the fully awakened Buddhas from the past? Those arahants from bygone eras? Do you have direct and personal understanding of the quality of the heart of all those Tathagatas from the past? Or have you gained personal knowledge of the level of their virtue, their meditation, their level of wisdom, their inner state, and their freedom from defilements and from future rebirths? Meaning, did you see mind to mind the other Buddhas, the other Tathagatas, especially those in the past. Now, only a Tathagata can know this. So he's saying, are you a Tathagata? And how do you know this? How can you be able to compare and contrast us? He's not saying immediately, like most other religious founders, oh yes, because this is an accolade. This is a major declaration by one of, by the chief disciple. Many people would say, yes, yes, indeed, I am the greatest. But here, Lord Buddha, first time, I've never encountered any similar interaction between the head, a founder of a religion, where they're going to probe and like saying, how do you know? It takes so much courage to put yourself out there, to question even your own chief disciple when they are saying such a pro statement, in a sense. And Lord Venerable Sariputta's response is very short. He says, no, blessed Lord. And Lord Buddha continues, and how about those arahants, Sariputta? Do you have the direct experience of knowing the fully awakened Buddhas that are to appear in the future? Are you able to go into the future and probe the minds of the Tathagatas and know that they are not of the same level as I am, basically? Do you have direct and personal understanding of the quality of the heart of all those Tathagatas who have not yet appeared? Or have you gained personal knowledge of the level of their virtue, their meditation, their level of wisdom, their inner state, and their freedom from defilements and from future rebirths? No, blessed Lord. And how about me, Sariputta? Now he's saying, because many people don't understand that as a rule, there cannot be two Buddhas at the same time in the universe, in existence. The universe will collapse. Okay? So later on, Mahayanists came up with all these multiple, countless Buddhas in different cosmos and this and that. That's simply impossible. There's, it doesn't work. The power of the Tathagata is so great that the universe cannot support two Tathagatas at the same time. That's why when we are now talking about the present, in this case, at their time, when they're talking about their present, meaning they're only talking about Lord Buddha as the Tathagata. Now, that's why Lord Buddha is saying, how about me? Sariputta, do you have the direct experience of knowing the fully awakened Buddha sitting in front of you at this present moment? Do you have direct and personal understanding of the quality of the Tathagata's heart, here and now? Or have you gained personal knowledge of the level of my virtue, my meditation, my level of wisdom, my inner state, and my freedom from defilements from any future rebirths? No, blessed Lord. If it was Venerable Anuruddha, he might have come close to knowing the mind of Lord Buddha, because he was known to have that ability to see mind to mind. Venerable Anuruddha was very close, and many commentaries have mentioned how he also had the qualities to some level of the 10 powers of a Tathagata, but he didn't have them perfected like it was the case for the Tathagata. So, but Lord Buddha is talking and addressing Venerable Sariputta. Then, Sariputta, it seems that you do not have the direct personal knowledge or understanding of the quality of the heart of all those Tathagatas from the past, those to appear in the future, or the Tathagata at the present moment. Therefore, how is it that you dare to set forth a proclamation, such a lofty and bold utterance, a veritable sounding of the lion's roar, by stating, Bhante, I have such faith, such confidence in the Blessed One, that I declare that there has never been, there can never be, nor could there be in the present any other recluse or Brahmin more exalted and superior in their awakening than the Blessed One. And this is Venerable Sariputta's response. Blessed Lord, indeed, I do not possess the direct experience of knowing the heart of the fully awakened Buddhas from the past, those arahants from bygone eras, those to come in the future, or of the Tathagata himself in the present. Nevertheless, I have personally come to know and see the truth of the Dhamma. And it is this realization itself which allows me to infer and make such a proclamation. You must have seen or come across, or at least heard me mention so many times, how Lord Buddha mentioned, he who sees me sees the Dhamma. He who sees the Dhamma sees me. So that is Venerable Sariputta's way of basing such statement upon his proclamation. Bhante says, I have gone deep into the Dhamma. I know the Dhamma. I realize the truth of the Dhamma. Based on that direct experience, from that, it is that I come forward and I say these things. And then he presents this simile. Suppose, Bhante, a king's frontier fortress was strongly fortified, with strong ramparts and turrets, which had only a single gate. And there was a gatekeeper who was intelligent, alert, experienced, and very cautious, keeping all strangers out, only permitting those who are friendly to enter. Now, as the gatekeeper carefully monitors and patrols the path that leads all around the fortress, he does not observe there being even a tiny hole or crack in the thick walls that would be big enough to allow even a cat to slip through. In this way, he comes to the conclusion: whatever decent-sized living beings wanting to enter or leave the city, they will all have to do so by going through this gate and this gate only. In the same way, Bhante, I have personally come to know and see the truth of the Dhamma, and it is this realization itself which allows me to infer and make such a proclamation. This is because, Bhante, all the Arahants, all the fully awakened Buddhas of the past, had already abandoned the 5 hindrances, the corruptions of the heart that weaken wisdom, having well established their minds in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. They had duly cultivated the 7 factors of awakening, and thus had liberated themselves by waking up to the unsurpassed, supreme, and perfect enlightenment. Similarly, Bhante, all the Arahants, so he's now talking about not just the past, but he's going to talk about the future, saying the same thing. All the fully awakened Buddhas that will appear in the future would have abandoned the 5 hindrances, the corruptions of the heart that weaken wisdom. Well establishing, so he's going to say that same thing. And similarly, Bhante, at present, all the Arahants, so he's not just saying Lord Buddha, but all of the Arahants, because Lord Buddha himself is an Arahant. Okay? That's what we say in the Itipiso Bhagava, Arahan Samma Sambuddho Arahan. He is also an Arahant. Starting with the Blessed One himself, all have already abandoned the 5 hindrances, the corruptions of the heart that weaken wisdom, having well established their minds in the 4 foundations of mindfulness and duly cultivated the 7 factors of awakening, and thus having liberated themselves by waking up to the unsurpassed, supreme, and perfect enlightenment. So that was his statement. Thus, in Nalanda, while staying at the mango grove of Pavarika, in addressing the Bhikkhus, there also the Blessed One taught them the following: Bhikkhus, such is virtue, such is collectedness of mind, and such is wisdom. Bhikkhus, when one lives with virtues throughout one's behavior, it becomes very fruitful, for it allows such a person to possess the very condition for right collectedness of mind, samadhi, to take place. When there is samadhi, it becomes very fruitful, for it allows a person to settle into the stability of mind. Then, such a person possesses the condition for wisdom, which itself is very fruitful, for it develops into the knowledge and vision, allowing one to see things as they truly are, and his unliberated heart becomes fully released, where his contaminants of sensual lust, rebecoming, and ignorance are ended, and he is finally freed, attaining that which up to that point had not yet been attained, reaching the safe shore of no more suffering. We'll stop here. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We'll continue from section 5 next week, where Lord Buddha will go to Pataligama. So I will pause here and see if there are questions, comments. You can start by speaking if you, because I can't, like I said last time, I can't see all of you. Yes, Ravi.
Bhante, you started this discourse with sati. You mentioned about connectedness as sati. Are there other terms which define sati? Example, like pasa, bhava, sanditiko, yoniso manasikara. How could you kind of like give us a little bit clarity on these terms and where is sati in it?
Very good question. I mentioned connectedness because connecting what? Memory, sometimes, or remembering, is another way of understanding sati. Because if the person has forgotten what they were supposed to be doing, you discover this especially on retreats, right? Where you're engaging in different activities mindfully. You're walking, you're opening doors, you're going to the bathroom, you're coming out, you're washing your hands, let's say, or fixing something, looking somewhere, observing where the eyes are looking. And suddenly you recall, oops, I was supposed to practice sati. All those moments gone because there was no sati. But we all have to practice at some level. We might not even have any proficiency. We might be so weak in establishing sati. But we have to constantly come back to it. That's why Lord Buddha has devised so many different techniques. What is the Satipatana after all? He divided the human experience into 4, right? But in each, just the body is itself is like so many different levels, so many different interactional dynamics taking place. But you mentioned yoniso manasikara as one of them. Passa is another, to see. What are these? Well, yoniso manasikara is a far more advanced level where you're constantly, sati is present, but you're now able to apply wisdom. So yoniso manasikara has wise reflection to it. Radical attention, Venerable late Bhante Nyanananda would call it. Radical attention, he would call it. Versus ayoniso manasikara, which is unwise attention. Because many people today practice some kind of meditation and they consider all meditation to be the same. Which, I have to spend time to explain to them that is not the case. That's why we have sammasati. That's another way of understanding, for example, yoniso manasikara. I would at least interpret yoniso manasikara as having the right elements of sammasati. Okay, it's not just sati. I used to mention especially to people who are not familiar with the Buddhist path, or those who who follow this mindfulness business in the world, where it's a money generating, it's monetized Dhamma, where they follow these characters like John Kabat-Zinn and all these, multi-billionaires today, thanks to mindfulness business. That is completely convoluted, completely divorced from the Dhamma itself. It has nothing to do with Sila, Samadhi, Panya. There isn't any Samadhi. But to demonstrate the fallacies therein, because there's no virtue there. There's no yoniso manasikara for sure. I would usually use the example of a sniper, someone who kills people, or a hunter with a gun, with a rifle, with a with the scope, looking carefully, waiting in hiding, laying in wait, just lying in wait, just waiting until the prey comes. And they're so careful. There's sati there, whether you like it or not. There is sati. They're very mindful. They're very alert. That is not sati sampajanyan that Lord Buddha is talking about. So I use the word connectedness to show how the practice has to be ongoing. And that's the reason why I use the word connectedness. Because many people today, even students in some cases, sit and practice for 1, 2, 3, whatever hours. And they might be legitimately practicing and doing and following the instructions as given by the teacher. But the moment they get up from their sit, they drop it. Sati is gone, as if they went to the gym. They did their workout. They did their laps in the swimming pool, and now we're good to go. And now I'm going to go and eat my lunch, and I'm going to splurge, or I'm going to basically drop sati. And that's what happens. And that's where connectedness isn't there. This path is all about connecting every aspect of your life. That's when sati really becomes mahasati. So, and that's when that sati becomes yoniso manasikara, because now you're always applying the right, wise attention upon whatever is taking place. And this is very important also for us not to be judgmental detectives, or noting like the Mahasi tradition would do, which causes more anxiety, more tightness and tension in the brain. That's not sati. There's no passaddhi that will come. There's definitely not going to be any wisdom taking place because you're too sharp. I gave the example one time, I don't know where it was, but when I was a child, this is not unique to one person, I'm sure we all experienced this. I used to have a difficulty sharpening pencils, and I love to use pencils, drawing this and that, especially like later on with colored pencils and things. So I would sharpen it, and you sometimes were, very rarely you would get a very solid lead pencil, but most of the time as you're sharpening it, and you want to get it to that very, very sharp pencil status, right? And you get that beautiful sharp pencil and you pull it out and it's like, yes. And then you start writing and all of a sudden it goes, there it goes. And now you have to do it again. To be that sharp means also not to be soft enough, not to be flexible enough, not to be organic enough. That also is wrong sati. When you're always like, did I miss anything? Did I miss anything? So you're becoming hypervigilant. You're almost like OCD. Obsessive compulsive disorder status, basically, with your practice. That's not healthy either. There needs to be the softness. That's why there needs to be the sense of relaxation throughout. Ease. And that's why I brought the example of not being, or mention of not being so judgmental. And that's why smiling is wonderful, to remind you to take it easy. Go easy on yourself. Give some metta to yourself, to the practice. Does that help? Good. Any other thoughts, questions?
Bhante?
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
How does one know if one has unshakable confidence in the triple gem? That's my question.
They know. They know. It's not a matter of them sitting and writing a thesis or dissertation to prove to you that they know. Do you know how to ride a bicycle? How do you know? You know. You get on the bicycle and you ride it. It's as simple as that. It's so abundantly clear. I give the example, sometimes some students have heard me use this metaphor. One time during meditation, actually right after I had this thought, I was like, oh my, it's like an elephant wearing an elephant suit to feel like it is an elephant. It's as ridiculous as that. Imagine an actual 100% genuine elephant, living elephant. You pick one, whether it's the Asian or the African, a real elephant, not feeling oneself to be an elephant, and going to the, I don't know, Halloween store, buying itself an elephant suit and saying to itself, standing in front of the mirror and saying, ah, now I'm an elephant. There isn't that doubt anymore in the mind of such a person that you described as having the imperturbable, unshakable serenity of mind. Unshakability. Akuppa ceto vimutti. The person knows. The person knows. So there is no convincing, because the mind is very tranquil. So they're not trying hard to, hey, did I really taste this? Oh, what do you think? The doubt. And some arahants in the past have mentioned how even as a Sotapanna, or even as an Anagami, there will still be some smidgen of doubt until the person becomes an arahant. Because remember the thing I mentioned about ignorance and its connection to doubt? That is the very last sangyojana, that is the very last fetter that the arahant to be still has to fight against, bulldoze one's way through and out of. And once it's destroyed, as we see in the lives of the arahants, in the suttas, in the descriptions, in the discussions, in the suttas that Lord Buddha gave us, we see how there is this transformation in the life of the bhikkhu or the person. But it is not happening just, haphazardly or by chance, because remember, the person had already tasted that unshakable faith in the triple gem. That is already, like I think you've asked me a question on the last day when I was giving a discourse in Malaysia. I think you asked, Joe, about the vision. What is the vision like as the Sotapanna? I think you asked me something along the lines of that. And it is not like a vision as we understand, like with the eyes and seeing something out there and outside, like the clouds opening up and rays of sun and miracles. It's not like that. The person becomes, they pass the point of no return. How's that? And they know that for themselves. That's when saddha reaches a point of a level of confidence unprecedented. And the person is ready to die for that. And they know what is Dhamma from what is adhamma. They will look around in the world and they will hold their mouth and say, oh my, what is being sold as Dhamma is really adhamma. But they know this for themselves. Remember, Pacchattam veditabbo vinyuhi, Lord Buddha says. This is to be realized by the wise individuals for themselves. That's why it's very personal. This path is very personal. That's why it's very difficult for anyone to explain to us how that, confidence feels like, or how do you know type of a thing. What do you know? Like riding the bike or the elephant, until the elephant wakes up and says, what am I doing? Wearing a suit, an elephant suit, when I am by flesh and reality, by DNA, I'm an elephant. What am I doing? That moment of realization, that's why it's called waking up. And the person is never the same. That's why the person, as a Sotapanna, they will never fall beyond or lower than a human realm, because their faith in the triple gem, the purity of the heart is now set on course. That's why it's called Sotapatti. You are in the sota, the current. And even if you lounge, if you get really, really lazy, push back and relax and say, I'm not going to be sitting, I'm not going to be doing any of this, whether you like it or not, the current is going to take you straight to Nibbana. That's not bad, is it? But one other thing, you will never be able to be okay with breaking sila. It becomes part of your DNA. You don't do it for anybody else. And that's when slowly, slowly it starts to become adi sila, higher virtue. You don't do it for show. You don't do it, oh, I'm doing the uposhata, I'm practicing the 8 precepts. In fact, you practice more than the 8, more than 10, more than 227 as far as I'm concerned. Because you become sila. That purity is the thing that is stopping you from falling below a human realm, by the way. You see the animal, you see the human being, you see other beings, and it's like you. You treat them like it's you. You don't want to harm them. And when they feel, they experience something wonderful, it is like you still. It's like you experienced that. And this is where the Brahma Viharas become part and parcel of the person's character. And that's why Venerable Nandiya, Kimbila, and Anuruddha were looking at each other with such beautiful, kindly eyes. Because they were all, well, later on, Arahants. So that's when your speech, when your thoughts, and your bodily actions are inseparable in the nature that is considerate, in the nature that is warm-hearted. So you don't have to follow any rules per se imposed upon you. You become the Dhamma. Lord Buddha was not making a bombastic statement. He who sees me, he sees the Dhamma, he who sees the Dhamma sees me. No, that was a fact that he was talking about. But he wasn't just talking about himself, which is something that many people don't understand. Every person who starts, even as a Sotapanna, on a path level, the person will become the Dhamma, little by little. And that's why they will feel offended if somebody is speaking adhamma. Sometimes people have, like, if somebody says something bad about their mother or their family, they feel very offended. Right? The same thing now would happen with the person when someone says something that is wrong, that is not Dhamma, as Dhamma, selling it like that. They will jump in and say, no. Or at least walk away from that. So I don't know how to formulate those words that might be convincing or satisfying for you, rather. But I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Bhante.
Any other thoughts, questions before we close? Yes, Ravi.
Bhante, on the question which the brother asked, I just want some clarification on 2 points. First one is in terms of the 4 imponderables, where Sariputta states and proclaims the Buddha to be in all superlatives. The Buddha questions him, that's one check. And Sariputta says he doesn't know about the powers of the Buddha, but he knows the Dhamma well enough to answer that question truthfully. That is one part of it, which is, and the second one was what Bhante just mentioned just now, about he who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha, and he who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma in the Buddha. So these 2 statements are accurate in terms of cross-referencing. Then we have another issue about present, past, and future. I mean, if we understand the Sabbhavasa Sutta, where the Buddha talks about how to see things and how not to see things, then is there a contradiction between looking into the past, looking into the future when it's actually supposed to be here and now? This is my question.
Okay. Oftentimes, what you just mentioned, Sabbasava Sutta, oftentimes when we get to that section, looking at the past, what was I in the past? What will I be in the future? Many people get to make that mistake, especially when they use this, like you made a reference to the one from Venerable Sariputta's lion's roar and his response to Lord Buddha's questioning. And they say, well, especially in regards to past, present, and future, the reference in Sabbasava Sutta, Lord Buddha is referring to, the sutta is referring to the individual being fixated on, what was I in the past? I wonder how deep I went, let's say, in my meditation. Was I a bhikkhu? I must have been a very intelligent bhikkhu. Or I must have been a very good, devout Buddhist. Or I must have been like this. You are already in Papancha land. The person is lost. This is what Lord Buddha does in the Sabbasava Sutta. This is what is being taught. The person has gone way, way out of the reservation, in a sense, as they say, meaning they are lost. They're no longer using the past wisely. Even if a person is able to see the past, you have students, you have individuals who do see aspects of their past lives. No big deal. It's like speaking French. It's like speaking another language or having a special skill. Well, for a person who does that normally, that's no big deal. So, but if I get fixated, I wonder where I lived. I wonder what I did, what I ate. You have so many countless suttas in the Dīgha Nikāya and the Majjhima Nikāya where Lord Buddha talks about the ability to have the divine eye and to be able to see the past. You know, it's one of the three knowledges that the Arahant experiences, right? To be able to see one's own past and to be able to see where beings, that's second knowledge. But in the case of a Putujjana, when a Putujjana is able to see one's own past, it's just an ability. There's nothing special, nothing to write home about, as they say. That is what the cautionary note is in the Sabbasava Sutta. Here, it is being used as a confirmation that it really doesn't matter, Bhante. The Dhamma, I taste it. I am the Dhamma. I live the Dhamma. The Dhamma is in my heart. Everything I look at, I see as Dhamma. And I see Lord Buddha in front of me all the time, and I see him as the embodiment of the pure Dhamma. I see it. You are the Dhamma, Bhante, he's saying. I don't have to go check in the past. And plus, Venerable Sariputta was known not to have any of those psychic abilities. He was known, and he was never interested, like Venerable Mahā or Venerable Anuruddha or other bhikkhus, because it becomes a major deterrent, major stumbling block, having the ability to be in the past or to see aspects of the past. So my advice, I think today I was, this morning I met with a student and a new student, and they were wondering about past lives, this and that, and it's no big deal. We've gone through so many lifetimes, countless lifetimes. What have these lives taught us? Can I learn from my past mistakes? So this is where I'm trying to find ways where we can avoid falling into that stumbling block, that I mentioned, where a person says, oh, what was that? Because you have an entire cult, in a sense, in population of this planet, where there's this mesmerizing effect of past lives. And that's missing the whole entire boat. We use the past because we're living in the present. We just use lessons from the past, if the person is able to see the past, that is. So there's nothing special about it. And that's where the cautionary note, again, is in the Sabbasava Sutta. Because sometimes I've heard people bring in the example from the Dīgha Nikāya, where they say, well, why then Lord Buddha mentioned that it is a knowledge, it is a skill, it's a good thing to have the ability to see the past lives. Well, to see it in a wise way, so you don't fall into the same traps. And you see why I behave in this way. Because sometimes you see certain behaviors in yourself that doesn't make sense. You keep falling into the same loophole, into the same trap, in a sense, the same hiccup, experiential hiccup, and you don't know why. That is where you can use, like I was saying, the example of a foreign language. If you're in that foreign land, what do you use? And no one speaks your language. Well, you go ahead and use their language, and guess what? You're going to be fed. You're going to find a place to stay because you are speaking their language. So you're using it as a skill. So Lord Buddha's insistence was to use that skill, not to throw the baby with the bathwater. Does that help? Does that seem to answer the question for you? Okay. All right. My voice is disappearing slowly. But tomorrow I'll have another retreat. This time it will be the Armenian Retreat, and it will be face-to-face. So, which is wonderful after 2 years of just Zoom. So, but the video will be still recorded because some individuals are out of the country, so they requested if they could still be part of it. So that will be tomorrow morning. So I want to save some of the voice that's left. So I hope tonight's discourse was helpful. And we'll continue. I know it's almost like a snail pace through the Mahā Parinibbāna, but it's worth it. And I'm only going to be covering it once in my lifetime, so might as well do the best job I can, given the time restraints. So let us dedicate and transfer the merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well, and may your practice continue growing with your persistent effort and training in Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And you are guaranteed to taste Nibbana Supreme. What a wonderful gift that Lord Buddha gave us. Sadhu. Be well. Be well. Until next week. Take care.
Sadhu, Bhante.